James, Michael, and Daniel. They had been wanting to go on a trip for a few days, but they couldn't find a good place. Until one day, Jimmy was browsing the internet and came across a picture of an abandoned forest with some strange stories written about it. For example, it was said that ghosts or jinns resided in the forest, or that people who had been there had heard strange noises. James, unlike Daniel and Michael, was always curious, especially about mysterious and scary stuff. So he decided to suggest this forest trip to his friends. The next day, James met Michael and Daniel and casually brought up the forest topic. But he didn't tell them about the eerie stories to avoid scaring them off. He started describing it as a nice green forest. I found a beautiful forest with rivers and waterfalls. It has a lot of sightseeing spots, and we can even camp there for a few nights. It'll be a real adventure. Michael and Daniel, seeing how good the place sounded, agreed to go and enjoy a few days in the forest. They packed their things and set off. They left the city. The road to the forest was a dirt path, no sign of asphalt. Michael and Daniel were surprised. One of them asked, "Are you sure this is the famous forest you talked about? Why is the road so rough?" James, still with his made-up descriptions, reassured them. It took them a few hours to get there. The forest James imagined wasn't there. It was a large green forest, exactly like how he had described it to Michael and Daniel. But he thought to himself, maybe those stories were just made up to scare people. Little did he know the strange events in this forest only happened at night, not during the day. There were no villages near the forest, and no people could be seen for miles around. They thought to themselves, how nice, no one's around. We can relax here in peace. But none of them knew this was just the beginning of the story. The sun set. The forest was no longer green. Everything was submerged in complete darkness. Even with a flashlight, they could barely see anything. Michael and Daniel were a little scared. As they sat around the fire, James decided to tell them the truth about the forest. When he started talking about the strange stories he'd heard about the forest, Michael and Daniel didn't believe him and thought James was just joking as usual. They didn't take him seriously. While they were talking, a sound came from behind the bushes. It was a faint sound, as if someone was humming a song under their breath. Each of them looked around, unsure. Daniel listened closely while James and Michael were getting nervous. They walked closer and shone the flashlight. They saw an old man with a cane moving strangely, walking through the darkness. They called out to him, asking him to come sit with them, but he didn't respond and kept walking, disappearing into the darkness. A strange fear took over all three of them, but they didn't think much of it and went to sleep in their tents. The next morning, they woke up to find blood coming out of their noses. They looked at each other in shock. This is strange. They stepped outside the tent. The car's body was covered in scratches. On the windshield, there was an odd line, and with blood, a message was written. If you stay here tonight, put out the fire so we can come join you. They quickly packed their things, jumped into the car, and headed back to the city, realizing that those stories might actually be true. When they got home, they saw that on the house door, the same strange writing had appeared again. Now it's our turn to visit you. If you enjoy this kind of story, subscribe to the channel.